Hi there, welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I'm recording in a kind of different location. I'm actually in my bedroom because hubby's working, so I can't film in the office. Um, and then in the sunroom, we have an uninvited guest in the form of a squirrel in the air vents, and he scares me. And I've called two places to see if somebody will come out and remove said squirrel on our behalf, and I'm still waiting on answers from both of those places. So for now, I'm just gonna let it vibe because when it's quiet in here, it doesn't chirp or anything. But I've noticed when I was playing music to put on my makeup, or if I was on the phone with somebody, the squirrel or creature or whatever it is would keep chirping. So I'm gonna try to record in here. It's adjacent to the sunroom, and we'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm kind of freaked out. I've never dealt with this before in my life. So, yeah. Anyways, welcome to my bedroom. Yeah. Today, I just wanted to talk about all the books I read this month and just kind of do some fun video and do another little fill in for you guys slash book review. Okay, so let's start off with this book because I literally just finished it right before I started recording. This is Jazz by Toni Morrison. I've been working on this book for a while, but it's kind of taken a backseat to other reads. This is by Toni Morrison. She is one of my favorite authors of all time. Sorry for the glare with the ring light. Yeah, sorry about the glare. This is a copy that I actually got from my undergrad college. The English department was handing out books and for free, and I snagged it. But I haven't read it till now, all these years later. So I started this after I finished Sula, which again, I love that book. Sula is amazing. If you haven't read it, please do. This is far more artistic, I think, than Sula was. Even though the underlying messaging and the metaphors are very well done in both, I feel like Jazz is a lot more conceptual than some of her other work that's very narrative driven. This is still narrative driven. So if you haven't read Toni Morrison, she often writes about the Black experience in the Midwest, or she writes about race related issues. And her writing style is incredibly poetic. I like to tell people that her kind of books feel like if poetry spat you in the face, you get Toni Morrison. So I think this is a beautiful writing style. A lot of her stories tend to have very and like the storylines, like the plot seems to be intense. So in this one, this book starts out with a man shooting his mistress, and then the wife of this man crashes in on the mistress's funeral and tries to mess her up and beat her up and stuff. um and so the drama from the get, right? But this book it sets that up literally in the very beginning, and that is the main issue throughout the rest of the book. But then at times it kind of goes into the more of the background and motivations behind each character and other side characters in the book. Jazz is kind of used as a metaphor, or the music of jazz is used as a metaphor for this kind of difference between city living and country living, and the temptation that causes people to act out or do stuff, wild stuff, I guess. That's the association, right? And obviously this is through a racialized perspective, so I can't speak too much on that or my opinions on how accurate that is. But that's kind of the overarching metaphor, and there is backstory comparisons back to I mean, obviously this is jazz, so it takes place in the early 20th century. This also has kind of flashbacks or whatever to times before that, where newly emancipated slaves were leaving the farm, or people were just leaving the plantations and farms and heading up north to these cities. And I think what is so beautiful about this is it shows the manifestations of trauma in ways that you wouldn't expect from certain types of people. And clearly what happens when there's all this unprocessed trauma and how it manifests in itself into different behaviors. That is kind of that you can see in Sula too. She's also written The Bluest Eye, which is a book I had to read in high school, and it was one of my favorite books of all time. but also there's high degree of violence in both of these books. And it's kind of like the violence itself is glossed over and it more focuses on not like the motivations, but it takes the plot's the plot, but then it just like her writing tends to reflect more on mindsets or people having these sort of like not out of body experiences, but people kind of dissociating. And the way she expresses that dissociation um, is tragic and beautiful at the same time. You know what I mean? Or she'll use certain metaphors or she'll reference to things in other parts of the story that can really easily be missed. And that's something I love about Toni Morrison's writing is like it's just so impactful and beautiful, but like it is work that I feel like needs to have effort to put in and to be analyzed. It's really hard for this, especially jazz, to be a casual read. I would not recommend this as a casual read. It would be very easy for someone to get lost because in this book in particular, I found it a little bit difficult because there was a lot of POV switching, uh, and you wouldn't necessarily understand because most of this book is written in first person, but there's POV switches throughout with almost every single character. And it kind of takes you a minute to catch on of like when that's happening because it will happen like mid chapter or you know what I mean. It happens at different points. So that can be a little bit confusing. So that's why I recommend like this book to be more of a slow read and maybe something with annotations. I was very lucky because this copy that I got is filled with annotations. I don't know if you can see because again, this was probably used for a class or you know the professor was doing annotations the entire time and writing. Clearly, it's like easier to read your own notes than somebody else's, but you know that helped me throughout the book. Um, so this is definitely something I think is worth like annotating. I'm not normally like an annotation TikTok girly because I feel like a lot of the books that do get annotated aren't you don't really need that, but you need it for this one. This is something that is not a casual read or a light read. This is something that you should really take your time with. Um, I guess I could read you the back of the book. Let me do that, and then yeah, because this book is infamous, like famous. It's you know one of it's like won a bunch of notoriety and stuff. Um, Jazz is the story of a triangle of passion, jealousy, murder, and redemption, of sex and spirituality, of slavery and liberation, of country and city, of being male and female, African American, and above all, being human. Like the music of its title, its dazzlingly lyric play on elemental themes as soaring and daring as a Charlie Parker solo, as heartbreakingly powerful as the blues. It is a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist Toni Morrison at her best. Yeah, so I would recommend maybe reading some of her other books before reading this one because there are kind of like little hints to other books. And oh, something I wanted to mention is that this is actually a sequel to a different book. Like they're all connected. I didn't know that reading it. You don't necessarily need to know that reading it, but I found out through the annotation that this is a sequel, and so that's why there were some references where I was like, what? Okay. So that was my dad. But yeah, so I'm planning to go back and read the associated books with this, but yeah, so you could read this as a standalone without that for sure, but I'm sure this would be more enriching if you read the other book first and then hopped into jazz. But I highly recommend this for anybody who's really interested in like American literature and the study of American literature as an art form. You can't pass Toni Morrison. She's just fantastic. Okay, so I don't have the physical copy of this book with me. I'm going to be placing a picture here or somewhere. But the next book I'm going to be talking about is Meddling Kids. I finished this pretty early on in the month, and it is basically Scooby Doo meets Lovecraftian horror or like Cthulhu esque universe. So it's as goofy and as fun as you would think. The person who wrote this is somebody who normally writes like TV scripts or movie scripts, plays, whatever scripts. Um, and they also don't necessarily write in English. I think this is their first book translated or written in English. This person, I believe, is from Spain or but I don't think they speak Spanish. I think they speak Catalan, but I will put that little note here when I'm doing my editing and my research. I'll put that in here. So this is somebody's second language, and you can there are really polarizing opinions about this book. When I finished it, overall I enjoyed it. There's some parts I didn't like, and there's some parts I did like. Um, but if you go on the Goodreads reviews, it's very, very polarizing. So this author has a very unique writing style. At some point in times, the book will switch from normal prose to kind of like stage directions or like script writing things. That's something I didn't mind so much because it is parodying Scooby Doo, Supernatural, and all those types of shows. So I got it. I got the artistic choice for that. Did it disrupt the flow of the story at times? Maybe. But that was something for me that was quickly overlooked, and not everybody else felt that way. So if you don't think that you would enjoy that, you might not enjoy this book. Um, but I mean, I enjoyed it because it very much read and felt like an RPG. If you do like RPG games or something, this it feels exactly like we used to play. So back when I lived in Boston, hubby and I had neighbors, and we would play role playing games with them. And then we did like a monster of the week type system because I've never really played D&D, but that was something that was easy for everybody to understand. And it's very much like you playing as a unique character in a Scooby Doo or Supernatural type um, system. So we all took turns writing monsters or scenarios every week, and then we would all come and play as ourselves, or we would be the DM for that week. So it feels very much like that. So if you're into those types of shows, you'll really like this. If you like Lovecraftian horror, there's plenty of references throughout, almost excessive references, I think, and there's also a lot of references to shows, almost borderline excessive, but I can appreciate it. Um, so if you like both of those things, you'll probably like enjoy this book. If you're not familiar with Lovecraft, some of these things might feel alien to you. I guess that's funny, but if you're not familiar with Lovecraft or his works, he writes about like the interdimensional space monsters that are beyond human comprehension, and they are like ancient elder gods, and just mentioning their name or bringing them or waking them up will cause the destruction of the world and reality as we know it. There's a whole mythos universe behind these guys, and with subcategories of like monsters and deities and stuff. So it's a lot to get into. Now, caveat: H.P. Lovecraft himself was a big racist and was not a nice person. And so sometimes his bigotry can come out if you read some of his writing, and it's just something to be aware of. It was like a long, long time ago, and people felt this way, but even way back then, not everybody was bigoted. So just just be careful of that if you're getting into Lovecraft as well. Um, People kind of like still use the Lovecraft lore and references as inspiration to their own horror stories, but they don't necessarily agree with his viewpoints on a lot of things. So anyway, weird tangent. So we're getting back to meddling kids, right? This is like Scooby Doo but adult. I would not recommend children read this at all. This is very adult. And then not every character is a one for one, obviously, but they do have like um, two guys, two girls, and a dog. Um, there is also so here's some of the criticisms that I didn't like. There's a queer relationship, kind of, uh, which poses could be problematic, and reading it, you can tell this was written by a man because none of this sounds like sapphic women or at all. There's and I wrote this in my Goodreads review, but it could be an instance of cultural misunderstanding or mistranslation, because I know queer people in different communities across the world use different labels for themselves, or identify different ways. But there's one character named Andy, and they call her Butch, um, but there's also hints to her being like genderqueer or not fully her seeing herself as a woman, but they never go as far as identifying as a man either. They don't necessarily use the word non-binary. Um, so that was a little bit confusing. I was just trying to figure out like what the appropriate usage would be to describe Andy. and then she is in love with the other female character pretty much. But during their interactions, the other female character makes it very very known that she is not queer and she's not into women, and she knows that about herself. But instead of respecting her boundaries with that, there's still this back and forth between the two. You know, do I think that's the healthiest mechanic for either one of them? No. Um, so questionable queer rep. I think it was one of those things where somebody's trying to be inclusive, but and like, not every queer relationship is perfect. Like obviously there's like messy relationships, or relationships can have messy starts. But I just think that there should have been a little bit more sensitivity reading screenings beforehand, especially if this person isn't a sapphic person themselves. Yeah, I could just read kind of poorly, and I wasn't the only one that felt that way. So just be careful. Also, this is a bit of a spoiler. So if you don't want a spoiler, just like skip over this section for a little bit and then just go to the next book, because I think this is the last comment I'm going to make for Meddling Kids. Um, so the big bad guy is revealed, and it this is somebody who is a necromancer, and so who has been living for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Um, and this person's referenced throughout, and we find their daughter, and we assume like, okay, it's the daughter. We don't know if she has a connection to her bad guy dad or what. Turns out that the daughter is actually um, the dad, and she's just transitioned, and that she's been transitioning back and forth as male presenting and female presenting, and that's how she's gotten away with um, being an immortal person and never being found out, is because she presents as different genders and different lifespans. Okay, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Like, I could see how that would be a thing, but like this, she made a comment that didn't sit very well with me, and she was like, "Yeah, it's so easy to like transition these days," or something, and she was like saying that to Andy, who again I'm not really sure of their gender presentation, but they use she pronouns, so I don't know. But anyway, so she made a comment about how easy it is to transition these days. And I thought that was a little insensitive. I was like, I don't think it's really that easy, bucko, but okay. Because cross dressing is one thing, but fully transitioning medically is another. And there's so much stigma and stipulation for trans people, whether or not they should transition on either side. It's not a decision that's taken lightly. And I think that language could be extremely harmful for trans folks. But, I'm not trans, I'm cis. So I guess, maybe my opinion isn't as valid, but that's kind of like how I felt reading that. I was like, I don't know about that. And it just kind of stuck as me as like, so I think there should have been more queer eyes on this book before it was published, to make sure that this is okay, because I don't mind a queer villain. I don't even mind a trans villain, I guess. But if they're not done in a sensitive way, or it does a lot more harm than good. So a little like, yeah, is there queer rep in this book? Sure. Is it well thought out and meaningful? I don't think so. I think it was just something to be different. So that's my opinion on that. But overall, it's a good book. I enjoyed the story. If you are, I think that this, if it didn't have the weird stuff connected to the queer characters, I think I would have enjoyed this book a lot more than I did. I thought it was fun. I thought it was quirky. This guy makes up his own words at some point. Again, a lot of people who are really into grammar don't necessarily like that. I'm fine with like an author being taking creative liberties and stuff like that. I I support it, so that doesn't bother me. But what bothered me was the questionable queer representation. So just keep that in mind. That was Meddling Kids, and I know this person has another book out. I'm not sure if I would read it though, just based on like what this book was. I don't know, but again, it could have just been a mistranslation, or it could have been like, in his country people go by different words, or just trying to make light of the situation. Sure. But I think if you want to write for a different speaking audience, you should understand the terminology for an English speaking audience. Like the same way if like I wrote a book in Portuguese for Brazilians, because I do speak Portuguese, my husband's from Brazil. If I were to write a book that was going to be sold in Brazil, writing in Portuguese, and I wrote some off the wall stuff that would not fly in Brazilian culture, then I should be held responsible for that. So that's just how I feel about that. But anyway, I'll move on. Okay. So my next book, I didn't know if I should put this in here or not. I just want to give a disclaimer that there is a boycott going on with this publisher. I did not know that this book was published by a certain publisher when I got it from the library. So I got Baby Teeth because it's been on my list for a long time. But I was like 2/3 of the way through it, and then I saw on the back page that it's published by St. Martin's Press, and there's a boycott of them going on right now, and I feel so bad. I feel so bad for picking this up, and I didn't realize it till I was like 2/3 of the way through, and I was like, shit. But I figured I would like at least let you guys know, because maybe you're like me, you didn't know, right? But now I know, and now you know that Baby Teeth is published. At least this copy is published through these guys, which is a shame because I did really like this book. But I just I don't encourage people to pick it up during the boycott. And if you want more information on that, I can make a separate video about that. But I just don't feel like getting into it right now. But yeah, so I'm just going to talk about this a little bit, and just because I read it and it was a lot of pages, and I feel wasteful if I don't include it. But basically, Baby Teeth is kind of like the orphan. Yeah, so the Baby Teeth is the story of this girl who is around 7, I believe. Her name's Hannah, and her mother's name is Suzette, and every chapter switches point of views between the 7-year-old and Suzette. The 7-year-old is developmentally disabled, so she is mute. She doesn't speak, and there's multiple instances when you're through her perspective, and it seems like there's also a physical limitation to her speaking. That's kind of like a debate throughout the book, is whether she can't speak or wants to speak, because she goes to the doctors and she gets CAT scans or whatever, and they say that there's nothing physically wrong with her, it's just she's not speaking. So, which is something that I kind of relate to. TMI, I guess, I don't know. But so I was a little bit developmentally delayed as a child. I was very shy, and I did not speak for a very long time, or if I did, it was very quiet. And it got to the point where my mom actually put me in speech classes as a child to help me socialize, I guess. I don't know. I have memories of going to speech classes in elementary school and going there by myself, or if I wasn't by myself, there was like a couple other kids that were there for like English as a second language, and it was just kind of awkward a lot. Um, but even before that, I remember like going to certain groups and like playing with cups or something. Very vague memories, but I don't know if I was like getting tested or what, because at some point in time my mom did tell me that the doctors thought I was deaf, but I wasn't deaf because I was like I would react to sounds, and I would look up at airplanes. So obviously that's not, I'm not deaf. And then somebody also put out the theory that I was autistic, based on like my extreme shyness and social anxiety, and I really had a like fixation on like order. So like if I stacked blocks and they would fall down, I would get into huge fits, that I guess were abnormal for a child. I don't know. So yeah, so that was thrown around too, but my mom didn't necessarily believe that I had autism. But yeah, anyway, so I was socially delayed. I didn't talk a lot. I was very shy. I'm a very outspoken person now, so that's a big change from childhood. But reading that kind of like made me feel a certain way, because I was also a little bit developmentally delayed as a youngin. So I could empathize with her and the shame and stigma that's around that, like when you don't fit in with your peers or you're not on the same level as everybody else. There's a lot of internalized shame, even from somebody who's really, really young. They can still feel that the same way adults can. So I was kind of, I was like rooting for her, and like low key, like her mom wasn't always the most sensitive about it. She was kind of a bitch about it sometimes, not gonna lie. Um, and you through Suzette's perspective, you see that she has a lot of trauma that she's dealing with as well. She didn't necessarily have the best relationship with her mother, and she also has a ton of medical trauma. because she's somebody who lives with Crohn's disease, and she had like an operation on her intestine or something. So now she has like some sort of bag attached to her. I guess I'm not quite sure because but she's got like medicine she has to take all the time, and there's parts of her that she finds disgusting, like physical parts of her and internalized parts of her, because she wants to be seen as like the perfect mom. She wants to be seen as a good wife, and she's searching for others' approval and her husband's approval the same way that Hannah is searching for not necessarily approval, but the affection of her father. So there's this antagonistic relationship between the daughter and the mother about the affection of the father, right? If you've seen The Orphan, this is similar. Yeah, okay, we're on the same vibe. Well, it turns out that Hannah's intentions are a little bit more malicious than just being a misunderstood child. She fully understands everything that goes on around her, but she is not very nice when it comes to going to school. She barks at the teachers and children, and there's instances of her physically harming other children trying to get out of school. And obviously, she gets kicked out of a lot of places. And so that's something that the father's having a hard time dealing with too, because he doesn't necessarily want to admit that his child is like could be disabled or going through something. There's a lot of denial on the husband's part, which some people in the Goodreads reviews were talking trash about him. I don't necessarily feel that way. Like, I was really empathetic towards him because he was the breadwinner in the family. Like, the wife didn't work, and so he was away for a long time, and he would only see her at night. And like, I think it's hard for anybody to admit that there's a problem going on, but it's just like that kind of tension that gets when you're like trying to portray this, image of being a perfect family, and then obviously it's not so. So yeah, that's kind of like the book, but it is a horror story, so I should let you guys know that it's a little bit scary sometimes. I was a little spooked sometimes, especially with the interactions between the child and the mother, because it gets to the point where the child is starting to have plans to hurt the mother to get her out of the picture. That's like the whole crux of the book, basically. Yeah. Sorry. Like I said, I don't think Suzette's a perfect victim either. Not like she needs to be, I guess. But she's definitely questionable with Hannah or some of her parenting decisions. Like, I'm not a parent. I don't have children. But some of her reactions to stuff, I was like, geez, lady, calm down. You know what I mean? But I think it's to show that the two of them are more similar than they think. And at times too, like, there's always this talk, and this is more later on in the story, but this talk about Hannah being really manipulative, right? I would argue that the mom is being manipulative as well, and because she reveals some of her internal thoughts about things, and it can come off very manipulative too. So they eventually diagnose Hannah with something. I'm not going to spoil it. And I don't know if it's an accurate diagnosis because I'm not part of that community. I'm sure. But yeah, anyway, so um, I always wonder too if like maybe that diagnosis is more genetic, and like if there's traces of that in the mom too. And I think that could be a great debate for other people who've read this book. I've seen mixed reviews on this book. Some people don't like reading from Hannah's point of view, that they think it would be better if it was just Suzette's. I disagree. I really enjoyed reading Hannah's point of view, even if it was kind of cringy, but she's like a 7-year-old. So yeah, I don't know. So some people don't like the evil child trope. It's definitely creepy. It's definitely scary. This book is scary. Um, I thought it was pretty scary. There's points where I had to like put this down, but I did kind of spur through the ending. Again, I feel bad because this is through St. Martin's Press, and I feel like I crossed the picket line, and I feel so bad about that. But again, this wasn't something that was bought. This was something through the library, so I don't know if that's more ethical or less ethical. I don't know. But yeah, so I can't really recommend this book to you guys right now. But if the publishing company, or if the author switches publishing companies, or if the publishing company gets their shit together, then I will. But yeah, I just want to let you know that I did read that. Okay, the last book for this month is bam, Horoscope, volume 4. Okay, so this is an anthology that I'm actually in. I haven't finished this quite yet, but I figured I'd include this in this month's read since this dropped on February 20th. This is the 4th installment of an anthology that is based on zodiac signs. So there's 36 entries in this, just like there's 36 entries in every other book. and they're all based off of one of the 12 zodiac signs. So there's 3 stories and poems per zodiac sign. So in the first installment of this, I wrote a story for my sun sign Cancer, and in this installment, I wrote a story for Libra, which is my rising sign. So if you want to give that a look, you should. There's a bunch of indie authors in here. The person who started this series originally published it indie, but then decided to start their own little publishing company called January Embers Press, and now this is released through January Embers Press. So it's a little bit different, but I figured I'd include this in case you're into astrology or zodiac signs and stuff like that. This might be a good way for you to connect with your sun sign, rising sign, whatever you deem most important in your life, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it was fun. It was interesting. And yeah, here you go, horoscope. So yeah, that's basically everything I read in February this month. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope, maybe I recommended some good books to you. Maybe, I don't know. This month has been kind of mixed for me. So yeah, right now in terms of like what I'm reading, and maybe I'll finish in March. I'm trying to restart that plant book I started reading like forever ago, to help as inspiration for the book I'm working on for Maud. But that's something I'm working on. And then I'm also working on, hang on, this is interesting. Okay, I also got this book from the library, so this is probably going to be a priority. But this is Frankenstein. This is a spicy book, and I normally don't read spicy books, but the premise of this was really interesting to me because it kind of shifts between the perspective of Mary Shelley actually writing Frankenstein to a descendant of hers interacting in the modern world, and it talks about like sex robots and AI and like all this other stuff. I don't know. So it just seemed kind of cheeky. And so I started reading it, and I'm not very far, obviously. But this is also what I'll be reading in March too. So those 2 books are on my list in March. Um, we'll see if I pick up anything else. But yeah, that's kind of just like a heads up for me what I'm reading in case you're interested. Yeah, if you like this video, go ahead and like it, comment down below, share it with a friend, or subscribe to the channel, please, please, please. That would really, really help me out a lot. And until next time, thanks. Bye.